Welcome to Spoiler Piece Theater, the podcast that doesn't give a shit about spoilers. We just want to talk about the movies. My name is Megan Kearns. My pronouns are she, her. I write film reviews for Edge Media Network. I'm a co-host of the Slashers podcast, a member of the Boston Online Film Critics Association, and a member of Gallica, the Society LGBTQ Entertainment Critics.
My name is Dave Riedel. My pronouns are he, him. I write about movies, and I too am a member of the Boston Online Film Critics Association.
And my name's Evan Crean. My pronouns are he, him. I'm co-chair of the Boston Online Film Critics Association, co-author of your 80s Movie Guide to Better Living, and co-host of the It's the Pictures podcast.
Yeah, you are.
Yeah.
Yes, I am. And I'm wearing a Ninja Turtle shirt today.
Oh, why have we not discussed that yet? That's amazing. Now, which Ninja Turtles? Is it the comics? Is it the 90s cartoon? Is it the latest
It's the
movie?
90s
it's the 90s cartoon.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Mhm. Yeah, I don't love the newer iterations of them as much.
That's
Yeah.
fair.
I don't really know any of the Ninja Turtles except the 90s cartoon. I saw the first movie because I remember Elias Koteas doing the garbage truck thing and killing Shredder.
Yep,
Oops. I think that's what he says.
he does.
That
Yeah.
sounds about right.
But I was just
You
going to
know-
mention that I'm wearing black, which is not a surprise to either of you. So,
That is funny. I'm also wearing black.
hey,
I almost always wear a black hoodie when we're recording, though. But yes.
I just
I feel like I
mentioning
always
what
wear
I'm
black
wearing,
too.
yeah.
Yeah, you always wear black too. Speaking of Ninja Turtles, though, I just have to say I used to live in Western Mass, and in Northampton, there used to be a museum to the Ninja Turtles comic books, and it was really
Ooh.
cool. Yeah.
Oh,
It's no longer there anymore, sadly, but it was really cool at the time because the creators like lived in Northampton or something like that, or went to school there, something like that.
I wish I had seen that.
Yeah, it was a really cool place, but it closed many moons ago. So, but now I feel like I want to know everything about your Ninja Turtle views, Evan. So we'll have to table that and discuss that more at another time.
Yeah, sorry to introduce a tangent first.
No, that was a good tangent. Before we dive into the show, but before we get on another tangent, I want to give a huge thank you to our sponsor, Peace patron, Heather Sachs. Heather, thank you so much.
thank you, Heather.
Thanks, Heather.
And speaking of Patreon, if you're a member, go check out our bonus episode this week. It is on the great neo-noir Devil in a Blue Dress, Carl Franklin's film starring Denzel Washington. We had such a great conversation, so go check that out. And if you're not a patron, consider joining. For $5 a month. You get access to our weekly bonus episodes. So for this week's show, we have 3 movies we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about the new Robert Zemeckis film Here. We're going to be talking about a queer film, High Tide, and documentary about John Williams, music by John Williams. So first of all, we're going to start with Here, which Dave is the one who saw. And like I said, it's directed by Robert Zemeckis. The screenplay is by Zemeckis and Eric Roth, and it's based on the graphic novel by Richard Maguire. And it stars Tom Hanks and Robin Wright, reuniting them all from Forrest Gump. And let me give you the synopsis. It says that this is an original film about multiple families and a special place they inhabit. The story travels through generations, capturing the most relatable of human experiences. Told much in the style of the acclaimed graphic novel. Tom Hanks and Robin Wright star in a tale of love, loss, laughter, and life, all of which happen right here. I see what they did. So,
Mhm.
Dave, lay it on us. Tell us all about Here.
Okay. So, yes, indeed. I saw Here, or as I like to call it, Boomer, the movie.
Not okay, Boomer, just Boomer.
Ooh.
This is written by boomers, made by boomers, starring boomers in things that boomers like, post-war. This movie it's not torture, but it's fucking terrible. So
Oh.
it's bad. I think, the graphic novel, which I have not read, the conceit being that different panels are in different times in the same space, which is why it's called Here. I think as a graphic novel, as a concept, that seems, I don't read graphic novels generally, but as a concept, I think, oh, that's kind of cool. Blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, Zemeckis translates that to the screen with panels and things like that. And it's just kind of distracting. the way it goes back and forth in time, and some of the characters you care about and some of them you don't. Most of them you don't. And yeah, it's just, and it's all white people, except it pays lip service to, a black family at the end, or throughout, but they're the last owners of the house, and to like a Native American couple that you see a few scenes of, because the movie actually starts in like the age of the dinosaurs, with dinosaurs running through, and then the meteor hits, and then everything, and then just snow and all this, and then it sort of picks. It's like a fast motion thing where you just see the landscape change. It's destroyed, and then it's snow, and then there's trees, and then hey, there's a Native American guy shooting at a squirrel with his bow and arrow or whatever. I don't know. And then it just keeps going, and you see the house being built. In the mid. I think they said it was constructed, like it was finished like in 1900. And so that's kind of interesting in that sense. And it's across the street from one of Benjamin Franklin's kids' house. So that becomes like a historical landmark, and that sort of works into the movie a little bit. But like Benjamin Franklin's in the movie, and they make this like, I'm supposed to give my father, because he flew a kite with a key on it, which never happened. So it's just like shit like that is really irritating. And I didn't really think about it while I was watching this, but I was thinking about it on the drive home. The movie Boyhood. If we remember Boyhood, the Richard Linklater movie that they shot over 12 years with the same cast, blah, blah, blah. Great movie. I loved it. And one of the things that I loved about it the most was there's no like big, oh my God, I got my driver's license. Oh my God, I, had sex for the first time. There's none of that. The most monumental thing is the kid goes off to college, and his mother's like, I just thought it would be different. And it's like, ugh.
Oh, that seems so good.
I know. You just feel so bad for her. But anyway, there is some of that in here toward the end. But unfortunately, they choose to focus on like the big moments, the Thanksgiving, and the brothers enlisting in the Navy to, fight in Vietnam, and he survives. And, like the kids going off to college, and it's just like, Tom Hanks being like, oh, I can't be an artist because I have to make money because we're 18 and you're pregnant. So I'll get a job, selling insurance. And, it's just like, fuck me. You've heard all of these stories told by all your relatives and their friends your whole life. I don't want to see a movie of it. Not because it's not interesting, but because I know it all. I don't care about one extended families and all the people who came before them living in this fucking house. The only thing interesting about it is the ways it kind of ties into the historical period. Like one of the previous owners dies of the Spanish flu. So that's kind of interesting. Like he's a pilot, and you think he's going to die being a pilot because, well, actually you don't think that because it would be really cheap. But his wife is like, you've got to get out of that infernal contraption, or whatever she says. And and then you see him, his funeral, and somebody's like, I'm surprised they have an open casket because, like plane crashes, they don't usually recover a body. And he's like, he didn't. And this guy's like, he died of the flu. He died of influenza. And it's like, oh. So I was like, oh, okay. So we know that it's like roughly 1918 or 1916 or whatever, and so there's just stuff like that. But then, just like Kelly Riley and Paul Bettany are Tom Hanks's parents. And it took me a while to realize that it was Kelly Riley because everybody is de-aged, or they're aged up. And everyone's just so cliche. It's just so cliche. It's like, oh, I couldn't go to college because, we decided, you got pregnant and we decided to keep it. Oh, I couldn't be an artist because I have to go work in the insurance company. Oh, you couldn't go travel to Paris because, you were stuck here being a mom. It's just like, who fucking cares? And yes, they do split up. And yes, she does develop Alzheimer's. And yes, he brings her back to the house after the black family puts it up for sale. And she remembers like one thing this time, that her daughter, whose name is Vanessa, which I'm pretty sure is Eric Roth's kid's name. their daughter Vanessa like lost a blue ribbon from some prize she won at school, and then mom found it between the sofa cushions, and like she remembers that, and it's like, oh, and that's the one time the camera angle changes, and then you see like the room that they're looking at, and it's just like, I really don't like this. I really don't like
Feels
it.
very notebooky.
Oh, it was so
thinking of The
notebooky.
Notebook.
That's the first thing I thought of, and I was just like, if you want to talk about a movie that I fucking hate to my core, The Notebook. And you've ended on The Notebook. The only thing that is different from The Notebook is they don't die next to each other. Because you don't hate them that much. In The Notebook, I hated those two characters, and I just wished the whole time that one of them would die, and I had to wait until the last 30 seconds, which was a bummer.
Wow.
It's the worst. You've seen The Notebook, right?
Yeah, it sucks. I don't
Yeah,
know if I
okay.
wish them death, but
Oh,
yes, it
absolutely.
sucked.
Well, they're fictional characters. You can wish them death and not feel bad, right? So
No, totally. No, you're absolutely right. I just don't know if I felt that strongly about it.
yeah. So anyway, here is it's just bad. It's just bad.
It doesn't sound good.
I don't have anything to say about the performances because the whole movie is so maudlin and mawkish. I just don't give a shit, you know?
Yikes.
Like I watched the whole thing and I remember it, but I'm trying as hard as I can to forget it.
You know, when you were talking about the time lapse and like starting with the dinosaurs and everything, you know, obviously I thought of like 2001, but then it also made me think of A Ghost Story and how time lapses and moves very far in kind of the same space. But that's done really beautifully and kind of esoterically. Like this does not sound like that.
We
so.
talking about the Ghost Story with like Melvin Douglas and like from the early 80s?
No. The
Okay.
one with Rooney Mara.
Oh, okay. Got it.
I thought that's what you meant.
Yes.
Yeah, I was thinking of a different
but I
Ghost
will.
Story.
I was like, no, but that's a fair question to ask because I could have been talking about the one from the 80s.
Yeah. So anyway,
What a bummer.
I know. It's just like
Yeah.
it's just not good. I mean, it's not bad. I mean, it's bad, but it's not. It's so technically well made, but who cares?
Yeah.
That you can't really hate it, but it's shitty. So so there you have it. There, I've said my piece.
That's a good
Okay.
piece. You spoiler pieced me out of wanting to see it.
Yeah,
You said your spoiler piece.
I did. Said my spoiler piece. Oh, that's a new one.
That is a new one. That's a good one. All right. Well, here is in theaters now. It opened on November 1st. So, Dave, do you have any final thoughts on it before we move on to the next film?
Skip it.
All
Dave
right.
was not here for it.
No.
No.
See, movie marketers, we can use the word here too.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, this reminds me of like when I saw Fight Club and someone like in the theaters the first night that it opened, I was so excited. And then I saw it and I was like, this is terrible. And somebody's like, what's Fight Club like? And I said, the first rule of Fight Club is that you don't fucking see Fight Club because it's terrible. And
nah.
that's what I think of when anyway,
I was like, I didn't know you felt so strongly about Fight Club.
it's a
feel
bad
like
movie.
I don't agree. I think people take the wrong lessons from it, but that's another conversation
Yes,
for
that's
another
true
time.
too. But you're
Yes.
you're definitely right about that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
but I can see a reticence to like it for that reason because of bad audiences. But anyway, I digress. We'll have to talk about that more another time. So let's talk about our next film, which is High Tide. It is written and directed by Marco Calvani in his directorial debut. It stars Marco Pagasi and James Bland with some supporting performances by Marissa Tomei, Maya Taylor, Sean Mann, and Bill Irwin. And let me give you the synopsis from the press release. Heartbroken and adrift, undocumented Brazilian immigrant Lorenzo searches for purpose in the queer mecca of Provincetown. As the summer season comes to a fade, he sparks an intense and unexpected romance with Maurice. Together, the two reconcile the pasts they've left behind and their uncertain futures. Yeah, so this is filmed in P-Town or Provincetown on the Cape, which is very much a queer haven. And so there's a lot of beach scenes, there's a lot of cute cottages, you see a lot of biking around the island, swimming, all that good stuff. But yeah, Lorenzo is alone because his ex, who never really seems like officially broke up with him, he's like waiting for his ex to come back. And he's kind of stranded here because he's undocumented and he was an accountant back in Brazil, and he has a certification. But because he doesn't have his papers and he's undocumented, a lot of places won't hire him. So he works as kind of a handyman, like doing painting and like cleaning. And he works with another guy who's basically a jerk.
He's a giant dick.
Yeah. I said basically because like he's nursing a broken heart because he's pissed off and salty that his wife, Marissa Tomei, left him because she fell in love with a woman. And he's pissed about that. Too fucking bad. Get over it, dude. Stop being a dick to sweet Lorenzo, who's the nicest guy ever. But yeah. And so that's basically what Lorenzo does. And he rents like a little shed in the back of this other guy's house who is always trying to talk to him. And he knows his ex too. And yeah, Lorenzo's kind of like, just on his own, doing his own thing. And then he meets Maurice, and Maurice is really nice and he's a nurse, and they immediately have a connection and they really enjoy each other's company. But Maurice is leaving in a week to go to Angola. And I don't know why this makes me laugh, but he talks about how there's more sheep than people there. And he talks about the work he's going to do there.
Made me laugh too.
I know it's kind of funny. But yeah. And so there's kind of this looming, end in sight because he's going to move. But then Lorenzo's also dealing with the fact that he comes from a really hyper religious community. Like he has a little picture of like painting of Jesus over his bed. And
that his mom insisted he put there.
Yes. And his mom's always checking in on him and, asking like when he's going to come back. And yeah, and then Lorenzo's still nursing a broken heart because there was no real closure from his ex. So yeah, that's basically the movie. I'm sure we'll talk about I definitely want to talk about the end, but let me hear from you, Evan. What did you think of this?
I liked this. I think it was a little too slow for my taste, but I liked this. I love Provincetown, so I was very excited to see a movie that takes place there and is shot there. I thought that Marco Pigossi gave a great performance as Lorenzo. He is kind of a quiet, soft-spoken character, but you can read a lot from his face.
Yes.
About what he's feeling and about what's going on, and his body language as well, and how he kind of reacts to situations. And he's in a really tough spot. His ex has left him. As you mentioned, he's undocumented. He says a few times in the movie that he's there on a tourist visa, but that visa is up I think he says in October. So
yes.
And this movie clearly takes place at the end of summer, where P-Town is kind of emptying out. People are kind of going back to their lives. So summer is fleeting. And, as he mentioned, Maurice has his own deadline of where he's going. And I feel like the movie does a really good job of capturing that kind of like dog days of summer, kind of trying to chase the nice weather and the good times as much as possible, from the fact that he goes to the beach every day and swims, usually naked, in the ocean. And then when he meets Maurice, they're on the beach and they spend all day at the beach and going swimming. And there's the party there that they go to, the kind of wild, drug-fueled party, which I believe is a real party that happens in P-Town, the Sinners and Saints party. So yeah, I like the vibe of this movie quite a bit. I did feel kind of like Marissa Tomei's character felt kind of, in some ways, tacked on / the magical white lady who shows up and is like,
that's not a trope I've ever heard of before, the magical white lady.
Well, she's one of those crunchy people, you can tell. He walks in on her in her meditation room.
Yeah.
And she's very sweet to him, and I really like her as a person in this movie. But as a character, I'm kind of just thinking like, okay, we have this rich woman who takes an interest in him. So, that will come back around later, which it seems to in the kind of montage toward the end, where it seems like she's kind of helping him get on his feet. I don't know if it's like helping him get a job or helping him in some kind of way. They're kind of sitting next to a computer together later on. So I like that she shows up. I just wish that she had more to do here. I did like Bill Irwin quite a bit, who plays Scott, who is Lorenzo's landlord / friend, because I think as awkward as he can be, Scott really does care about Lorenzo a lot. You can tell. Specifically the way that he's always kind of watching and wanting to talk to him and wanting to help him. Although it does suck later on when you find out that he knew about Lorenzo's ex getting married, which Lorenzo finds that out later, that his ex not only just left him, but was getting married. And that's a real blow. And that actually fucks things up with Maurice too, because Lorenzo is just so crestfallen about the whole thing. He just decides to take drugs while he's with Maurice and just kind of goes off the deep end. And it creates an awkwardness that needs to be resolved at the end when they're saying goodbye to each other, but it's still really a heartbreaking goodbye as they hug each other and Maurice heads off to get on the ferry, especially because Lorenzo does try to go after him. He gets on his bike, and of course, it's mentioned several times in the movie that bike has a faulty chain, and so of course the bike chain breaks and he doesn't get to the ferry in time, and that's really sad. Like, I kept hoping that somehow maybe Maurice didn't get on the ferry. It would be one of those things where he'd get there, see the ferry leaving, and then Maurice would be there, but alas, this was not that movie.
No, but there's a silver lining, because when he's on the phone with his mother, he says, did you know that when he says, I'm not coming back, I have to tell you the truth. And he says, did you know there's a land where there's more sheep than people? So I was like, oh, maybe he's planning to go to Angola because Maurice had invited him.
Yeah, it seems like
the door's open.
He might. Yeah. Do you feel like, so there's a couple of things. One, obviously, he's not out to his mom. And
very clearly,
2, he actually made up a whole thing about how he got accepted to Harvard, and that's why he's in this area, and with elaborate fake paperwork and everything. So his mom thinks he's at Harvard. And so did you feel like at the end that was the start of a conversation of, okay, I'm going to come out and I'm going to tell her about the Harvard? Or you think at least he's going to tell her about the Harvard thing?
Yeah,
first?
I think he was going to tell her about the Harvard. And that's a great question. And it's very possible he was just like, listen, I'm going to lay it all out. I had a feeling, though, he was going to kind of like ease into it and tell her about Harvard and then tell her that there is someone, but not necessarily come out yet. But who knows? Maybe he did. What do you think? Do you think he came out?
Probably, but not in that conversation. I feel like he probably needed to kind of let the Harvard thing,
let that shock, fade away a little bit.
Yeah. So I think she was. I think coming back around, aside from this being kind of slow, I did think it was really good. What did you think?
Oh, I loved this. I loved this. I loved the slow vibe. I loved the summer vibe, the kind of, that liminal period of the end of summer. I love that. I loved the rapport that they had, the chemistry.
They have a great rapport.
Yes. Marco Pigossi, I adored him. I thought he was so fantastic in this part. Like you said, he's very soft-spoken, but very expressive. And I loved him. I was like, where has this guy been? And he's a big actor in Brazil, and he has done some work here in the US. Like, he was in the spinoff of The Boys, the series. But I was like, I want to see him in everything. Like, he was just that good. He was just so captivating and so empathetic. Like, I just wanted to follow him and see what else he was doing in his life. And I just kind of wanted to hang around him. Like, I just really, really loved him. But yeah, his rapport his character's rapport with Maurice was just, their romance was so tender and sexy and just really loving and lovely. And they were genuinely interested in each other, which I just really appreciated. And yeah, I loved their heartbreaking goodbye, and you are not lying about it being heartbreaking. I started crying and then just could not stop crying because the way the camera spins around, which is very kind of cliche in the sense of like, oh, it's a big romantic moment. But it didn't feel cliche. It felt very, very tender. It felt very loving. And the way that Lorenzo is like hanging on to Maurice, and like the way you see his hands on his back, and he's like clenching him, like kind of like a don't let go, even though he never says those words. It just wrenched me in two. It was so good. I love that scene. I love the way they're talking to each other. I love the way they're looking at each other. I love their body language, the way they hug. It's just so good. And then I love that his stupid boss is being such a fucking dick, and he like just like snapping at him like, hey, what's wrong with you? Snap, snap, snap. And then he just takes off to go try to chase after him. And I love that. And of course he doesn't make it, but I'm just like, oh, another wrenching moment. But it's just, it's so romantic. It's so good. I loved it. And whatever happens to them, because the door's open, but who knows, because I was thinking about this. I was like, well, what if Maurice meets somebody else? Or what if it takes him, Lorenzo a long time to go over there? And I was like, that's not even the point. I mean, it is, I guess, in a way, but the point is that they had this beautiful moment between the two of them. And it's about Lorenzo coming to terms with the loss of his relationship and kind of moving forward. Because like earlier in the film, his friend tells him, his friend who's also queer is like, hey, you need to get on PrEP. And he's like, and he gives him some PrEP because he's like, oh, I can't go to a doctor because I don't have the papers. And he's like, oh, just go to a gay clinic. They're not going to ask you for your papers. And then you see him finally sitting in the waiting room at a clinic. And so it's like he's getting his health in order. It seems like maybe he's getting his immigration in order. Possibly with the help of Marissa Tomei, which, by the way, I kind of loved her in that role. I know it's such a tiny role, and I know exactly what you mean, that it would have been nice to have like it more fleshed out. I kind of loved it because I feel like she was giving him advice on love, and like she has these beautiful paintings and kind of talking about how she kind of came alive artistically when she stopped listening to other people and when she met her love.
Yeah.
And I kind of dug it. I loved it.
Conversations too.
Yeah, those conversations were great. And Marissa Tomei is such a great actress that I was just like, I know this role is tiny. I don't even care. I just love that she's here. But I know what you're saying. But yeah, I just adored this. I thought this was wonderful. I thought it was so good. Just so good. Everything was so good.
Yeah. I liked all of the queer dynamics that the movie explores too.
Yes.
Like in the beginning when he has that random hookup with that guy at the bar who's so disgusting.
Oh my God.
He's so gross.
That was really disturbing because I would argue I don't want to tell anybody what their experience is, but that's sexual assault.
Oh, it definitely was. And then when that guy, so Dave in the scene, the guy insists on not wearing a condom and is very rough with him. And it's clear that Lorenzo wants him to wear a condom and and the guy just like ignores him and is just kind of like does it and then rolls over and is kind of like, oh, you can get out, you can go or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and Lorenzo also says he's like don't come, and the guy does, like, so he's violating two very explicit boundaries. So so gross.
Yeah, and the guy was so gross that later he sees him at the Sinners and Saints party, and the guy doesn't even remember having sex with him and starts hitting on him like they never met before.
Oh boy.
Yeah. So that was, I thought that was very effective. But I loved the friend, even though he was in a couple of scenes. That conversation you mentioned where he gives him the PrEP. And then later on, when he's on that date with Maurice and the friend is the waiter, and there's that kind of quiet moment where he pours the water and walks away, and they trade that look where the friend kind of mouths to him, oh, yeah, that guy's super hot.
Super hot, yes.
Yeah.
It's so cute. Very supportive.
Yeah. And also later on so there's a new neighbor, And Scott, his landlord, thinks, okay, well, this guy is a lawyer. Maybe he can help you with the immigration status. And that's
God.
played by Brian Batt, who was in Mad Men. And that guy is also just super gross. He's
Mhm.
grabbing his leg and thinking, oh, this is a young thing I'm going to hook up with. And then there's the whole conversation between him and Scott about, oh, LGBTQ. When did they add the Q? I don't get it. In the IA, what the hell is that all about?
Mhm.
And I find that really interesting because Todd, the lawyer character, is kind of spouting off, and Scott is actually kind of not having it. He's saying things like, "No, that's just is." It's basically like, "Get with the times, idiot." Like he is very much kind of annoyed about it, but watching, Lorenzo in that scene, he's a simmering volcano. You can just see on his face he's so annoyed to be trapped in this dinner and he's about to explode.
Yeah, no, that guy is totally disgusting and racist. And like, yeah, he's like, ugh. It's awful to see someone who's gay be so exclusionary to other, members of the queer community. But yeah, he's repulsive on multiple fronts.
Yes. So, I mean, I think the movie did a really good job of exploring some of those dynamics and how,
Absolutely.
the power dynamics, the racial dynamics, things like that. And, yeah, some gross dudes.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of the racial dynamics, I'm glad you mentioned that because there's this really great scene when Lorenzo and Maurice are on a date and Lorenzo's talking about how, he doesn't he feels out of place because he's not a US citizen and how he'd like to be. But then Maurice is like, yeah, but I feel out of place. And because he talks about his experience as a Black man and how they both kind of have they're coming from different places, but yet have kind of a similar yet divergent experience. And then I love when they're in bed together and they're talking about kind of like the top bottom verse conversation. And Lorenzo calls Maurice a stud, and Maurice immediately recoils because he's like, only white dudes say that to me. So
they assume that about me and it makes me uncomfortable.
Yeah. And he's like, I'm verse. And then I thought, like, I felt bad for Lorenzo though, because he's like, oh, I can be verse too. And it was so like, it's like, he fucked up, but it was just like so sweet because he's like trying to be supportive and trying to make amends after fucking up. But yeah, it was. But yeah, and then I also love Maya Taylor's not in it a lot. She's Maurice's friend, but I love that she's there too, and she's great. And so you get a little snippet of a perspective of a trans woman, which is great. So yeah, I agree with you that I like that it's showing different perspectives. Is there anything else you wanted to say about High Tide?
I don't think so. I think we covered it.
Yeah, I just kind of want to like live in this movie, like just like the beach and the quiet of the end of summer. I love it.
You two spoiler pieced me into it.
Yeah, I think you're gonna like it, Dave, because it's very, very sweet, very tender, very quiet, very slow, but like in a good way, way. Like
you know how I feel about slow movies.
I know. That's why I was like, I know, right, you're not put off by slow.
Right, exactly. You'll definitely dig that, and it definitely captures the tranquility of being in P-Town on kind of like the edges of the off season.
Yeah.
Because I've been there when it's the thick of summer and there's a million people there and it's a lot of fun, but also been there in kind of like the off season, but like before the summer, and it's really kind of nice and quiet that way too, where some things are open, some things are closed. There's not a ton of people. You can just kind of be there at your own pace.
Yeah, agreed. Oh, yeah. This was a nice, charming delight. So High Tide opened in New York theaters on October 18th, and it opened in LA and on October 25th. And now it's open in select theaters in select cities. So be sure to check to see if it's in your city. Hopefully it is, and you can go see it. All right, let's move on to our third film. That is going to be the documentary Music by John Williams. That is going to premiere today, November 1st, in theaters in New York, LA, London, and is on Disney Plus right now. And this is directed by Laurent Bouzereau. And let me give you the description from the press release from Disney. The documentary offers a fascinating and insightful look at the prolific life and career of legendary composer John Williams. Yeah, that's correct. And that's very, very succinct and to the point. And yeah, this is a talking head documentary. It involves interviews with John Williams as well as numerous composers and filmmakers like Steven Spielberg, George Lucas, J.J. Abrams, so on and so forth, Kathleen Kennedy, the producer. And it also involves archival footage and looks at John Williams and his career, his history as a person, as well as a jazz pianist, a composer, an artist, how he got into scoring films. I only got to see the first half of this. Dave saw all of it. So Dave, why don't you take it away and tell us more about it? Tell us what you think, all that jazz.
Well, this is, I mean, it's fine. It falls into that category of, you know, when documentaries are authorized and they're just kind of like, we're going to do this and celebrate someone, da, 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 da. And that's just what it is. And the only thing that I really learned about John Williams that I didn't know was that he was a jazz pianist before he was, a film composer. I don't know much about him before he became huge. And here's the other thing. I don't love the bulk of his work. So I find him to be, I feel like a lot of the time he plays too much to the saccharine end of things. And it really, I feel like a lot of his scores get treacly and they're not for me. I'm more of like a Howard Shore kind of person, like weird, dissonant, or loud and in your face.
Like Mika Levy.
Yeah, kinda. But I always think about the David Cronenberg movie Crash, not the racism movie by Paul Haggis.
It's so sad that we still need to differentiate the crashes.
I know. But I mean, that score is just the weirdest, eeriest, and it's not like a cinematic score, cinematic in air quotes, because I'm sure there are strings on it, but it's like electric guitars hitting like weird notes and just like shimmery sounds and shit like that. Or you think about, well, anyway, we're talking about John Williams. So, I do like, the Indiana Jones theme, and
so great.
So
it
good.
is great. That thing,
Jaws.
Jaws is great. I mean,
love Jaws.
The scores of his that are great. And so you can think of Jaws, you can think of Raiders. I don't remember what Temple of Doom sounds like, but they talk about Short Round having his own, theme. Okay. I guess he does. And all, like we said, Star Wars, like the Imperial March in Star Wars. That's like
so
my
good.
kind of thing, like in your face, creepy, but also a little bit majestic. And that's the kind of thing I like. So I was interested to hear why Steven Spielberg loves him so much. And the answer is because Steven Spielberg loves him so much.
I mean, that's not the only reason.
No, that's not the only reason. But he the way he explains it is he just felt like that Williams just understands exactly what he wants. They don't really have to talk about, and it's been that way since the beginning. And he says something about Spielberg says something about, like when he played me the Jaws theme, I was like, it's 2 notes. And he's like, no, like that was the one. He's like, no, trust me, it's going to work. And then they did it and it worked, and I feel like it's just a lot of that. It's like people who really revere him and admire him talking about how great he is. And so as far as documentaries go, it's not, I mean, it's a documentary, but it's more like, if you like John Williams and you like the movies he's worked on, this is the documentary for you. It's not it. I'm not saying that I want people to talk about like the evil side of John Williams. I don't want that kind of documentary.
I mean, I don't know what happens in the second half, but there's a little bit of that in the first half with his daughter.
Yeah,
talking about how he was an absent father,
but that's really it. You know, I mean,
that's a big deal.
It is a big deal, but that's like all like it's that scene. You know, and then she's in the documentary later, but it's clear that they have a good relationship now, and that's what they focus on. So,
yeah, because I was creeped out because like everyone's talking about how he's like the greatest guy and he's such a gentleman and he's so nice. And then when the daughter came on, it's talking about like, yeah, I had to essentially raise my brothers after our mom died.
Yeah,
I was like, Jesus,
whoa, that's rough.
And they were teenagers, but still not the point. They're still babies, still kids. But then, and earlier, it was also kind of, I get it, but I'm a little disturbed when he's like, she's telling a story about like how, I really wanted his attention. And so I wrote on a piece of paper, you need to come out. I need to show you something. And I shoved it under the door. And she's like, and he was mad. And then it cuts to him talking about like, yeah, I didn't work at home a lot then like I do now because of the distraction of my kids because they were so loud. And I'm just like,
yeah,
dude, what is wrong with you? Like, so... But that colored my perspective of him.
But that's all there is. I mean, it's, you know...
I hear you.
See, the better story would be like when Moon Zappa wanted to hang out with her dad and she stuffed a note under the recording studio door and was like, hey, I have this idea about a song about Valley Girls. And then they made Valley Girl. Because he was
this is a nicer story.
Yeah, he's like, this is a good idea, Moon. Let's do Valley Girl. You know,
that's actually a really sweet story that I did not know. That's lovely. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think there are a lot of sweet stories about Frank Zappa, but that's one. So
that is one. But yeah, I know exactly what you're saying though. Cause like, again, I only saw the first half, but everybody was like waxing poetic about him. And like, there's this reverence about him, but I just burned on my brain, will forever be his daughter talking about him.
For sure.
And like, clearly she is salty and rightfully so.
But there are other things about it. It's like, I don't want to hear J.J. Abrams' opinion about John Williams. I don't give a shit. I don't want to hear Ron Howard's opinion about John Williams. I don't give a shit. Like, make a good movie and then come back to me. Okay.
Shots fired.
Pew pew.
I mean, you know, I mean, Ron Howard has made good movies. J.J. Abrams
I'm just picturing Ron Howard's voiceover from Arrested Development.
Me too.
And picturing him. Dave Riedel did not think Ron Howard was a good director.
Yeah. So, you know, the other thing about John Williams is, he does do different things, but a lot of the time, especially in the Spielberg movie, it's like you hear it, you know, they work together. That's, you know, that. But a lot of times it's like you hear Alan Silvestri and you're like, that's Alan Silvestri, you know, because he's always got the fucking marching themes in every fucking score that he does. And so when you hear John Williams, you just like the big swells of horns and things like that. And sometimes it's great. Indiana Jones, Star Wars, you know, and sometimes it's like, do we really need this in Empire of the Sun? I don't know. So...
Yeah, I was going to say, sometimes he does do different things, like thinking of like kind of like I think of them as like twinkling or tinkling bells, like in the Harry Potter theme. Like that's
I've never seen any of those, so I don't know.
They play it in the movie, in the documentary.
It was memorable then.
There we are. It is to me. But I also like John Williams, so there we go. But yeah, I think, and like they talked about like how on Sugarland Express, how, you know, there was that harmonica solo, and that's very different than the stuff he normally does. So I think there is some of that, but I know what you're saying. Like, yes, he's known for the big swells, the orchestral.
Yeah. And there scores. Yeah, they do talk about like some of the subtler stuff. Like, I don't think it's particularly subtle, but the happy theme when the family is reunited in Home Alone. Like, all right.
Oh, yeah.
And
or the jazz score in Catch Me If You Can.
the jazz score in Catch Me If You Can
Ooh.
is a very different score for him.
Yes,
And
very
it's a
different.
really good score.
Yep.
And, they talk a little bit about like Munich and, they talk about the big movies. They don't talk about, Space Camp.
I love Space Camp. No
I'm just
joke.
saying, it's like, I mean, Kate Capshaw's in this, so maybe they did talk about Space Camp and I just don't remember, but
I'm not familiar with Space Camp.
Oh, you need to see Space Camp. It's
Space
great.
Camp is the 80th of the 80s.
It is. It's terrible and great all at once. It's amazing.
Yeah. It is something else.
Yeah. Yeah. I was really glad that they talked so much about Close Encounters of the Third Kind because
That's a good score.
Love that score.
That's a really good
Yes.
score.
It's an
So
iconic
good.
one for sure.
Yes. And he talked about how that was like the hardest score he's ever done. Which I was like, yeah, that's understandable. Like with all the like various like sounds later in the film. Anyway.
Yeah, but this
so
not just
good.
that, but you got to come up with a theme for the aliens that,
Mm-hmm.
is like, what does otherworldly sound like?
Right.
That's
Right.
kind of, that's difficult,
Mm-hmm.
So I don't want to sound like I'm belittling John Williams or anything like that. I don't. He's obviously a great film composer. He's just not my film composer. Another one that I was thinking of, I like my Hans Zimmers just because I like the big like
Oh yeah.
sounds that come into everything that he does.
That's my
I know.
example. Whenever I say Hans Zimmer, I go.
Even
Yeah.
when it's not Hans Zimmer, like even when it's one of his like proteges, they're still doing like some
Yeah.
version of that.
Yeah,
Mhm.
but he does it best. I don't know.
I mean, yes, there is that.
But
I found it really fascinating, and this is so. I think it's always interesting, like what you learn and what you didn't know, because like the jazz pianist aspect, that was like the one thing I did know about him, and I know almost nothing about him. But something I thought that was interesting, which is something that like as soon as I heard it, I was like, oh yeah, but I hadn't really thought about it. Is when Steven Spielberg very early on is talking about how there was kind of this. He was worried about this death of orchestral scores because the films of the 60s and the early 70s were using soundtracks, and he wanted to get back
Right.
to orchestral scores, which is partly what led him to John Williams. And I thought that was really, like, to me, that's so interesting because I think of, because of those iconic scores from Star Wars, from Jaws, well, not Jaws, not orchestral, but still thinking of it in kind of in the pantheon of scores, thinking of Raiders of the Lost Ark, thinking of these like swells of orchestra. To me, like an orchestral score is just kind of like the standard. It's not
Right.
unique. And so it's fascinating to think about, oh, that needed to be recaptured.
See, but I understand where Spielberg is coming from, because one of the things, I love Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, but one of the things that takes me out of that fucking period
Yes,
movie
yes.
is Raindrops Keep Falling on My Goddamn Head.
I could not agree more.
It's
Yes.
a terrible, terrible choice. It's a terrible
It is.
song, but it's a terrible
yes.
choice.
I could not agree more with you. You're so right. It's
yeah.
so bad. And I don't know what they were thinking anyway.
And one of the things I've grown to appreciate about Steven Spielberg over the years is how he has, he's so versed in cinematic history that
Yes.
he's able to make a decision like that. And then he's the most
Yes.
successful director ever. So he's able
Mhm.
to actually make that a thing.
Yes.
Film score, orchestral scores aren't going to die on my watch, I think is what he
Yes,
says.
that is exactly what he said, which I love. Also, and it's no surprise because they're friends, but thinking also about George Lucas and how when he was talking with John Williams about the score for Star Wars and talking about how every, this is common knowledge, but like every single character, has their own theme, with the leitmotif. But what I found fascinating, what he said was, he's like, I wanted to evoke Peter and the Wolf. And I was like, oh my God, duh, because every single character in Peter and the Wolf is their own instrument. It totally
Mhm.
makes sense. So, but hearing like those little things like that, I was like, oh yeah, that's so brilliant. Like, yeah. So I was kind of eating up those like little moments.
Yeah, it's like the little things that you like.
Yeah.
What I
Yeah.
don't want to hear about is J.J. Abrams being like, yeah, it's because I had to use him because he's fucking awesome. It's like, oh, shut up. That's not what he says, by the way. But
he's like, no, he's more like mystery box, mystery box, mystery box. Awesome.
yeah.
Just kidding.
Oh. Yeah.
Anyway.
But yeah, I'm with you. Like the kind of like going on and on and on, the reverie. Yeah, that's less interesting to me too. I agree with you on that.
At least this didn't feel like a funeral. There is a documentary about.
That's true. It did not.
The reason I say that is I think about this. I think about this documentary way more than I should. I don't remember the name of it, but it's the documentary about the actor who played Big Bird forever.
Oh, Follow That
Spinney.
Bird.
Yeah. And it's the most like, it's just wall to wall, like funeral music. It's the weirdest thing. And Big Bird performer was alive then. Was it Carol Spinney? Is that the?
Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah. Was alive when this documentary was made. So I'm like, what the fuck is this? This is.
I don't think he died much later either, though.
Yeah.
I think he died shortly after it came out or something.
You would
Is that
know.
why they
Mr.
knew he
Muppet.
was sick or something?
I don't know.
Because that's a weird choice to make it like a dirge.
Well, I remember he retired, and
Oh, maybe that's why.
I think that was definitely the kind of thing where it was like he finally retired, and then like, okay, people knew that wasn't going to be much longer if he finally was hanging it up.
Well, because didn't he have to like bend over and have his arm at a weird angle, like every time he
Yes.
was in the suit or in the
Probably.
costume?
I don't know.
Yeah. So
You do think about that documentary a lot,
I
though, because
do.
you have talked about it before. Yeah.
I have, yeah. I'm looking at it right now. I Am Big Bird, the Carol Spinney story. There you
Oh,
go.
not
When did it
Follow
come-
That Bird. Why did I
Yeah.
think it was Follow That? That's the movie.
Well,
I don't know why.
that's the movie with Big Bird. Wait, when did that documentary come out, Dave?
2014. I think he died in 2019 or 2020.
Okay, yep. All right.
Yeah.
So maybe I'm wrong.
Oh, got to get back on your Muppet trivia there, Evan. Jeez. You know what? I can't remember what it was now. Something happened that was Muppety. Like there was a Muppet thing that I saw, and I was like, I got to send this to Evan, and then I forgot what it was. Oh well.
Oh no.
Was it the tweet talking about how someone said they need to make a movie that everyone loves, and someone said they did, and it was a scene of Muppet Christmas Carol?
No, that wasn't it. But
That was
Oh.
sheer delight for me because
I
I was
would've-
like, yeah.
I would have liked that. I am a dedicated follower of the Muppet History social
Yes.
media accounts.
I follow it too because of you.
Aw.
anyway, we're talking about John Williams.
Yeah, so back to the John Williams documentary.
So that's it. It's fine. I mean, it's, it's nice to know that when the canteen theme was written, it's, it's like, oh, it moves along like that because of his jazz background. Okay.
Mhm.
And, Steven Spielberg's anecdote about orchestral scores aren't going to die on my watch, but there isn't
Yes.
enough of that.
I will say the other thing I did like was when John Williams was talking about his career and he was talking about his transition. He was kind of on the verge of transitioning into film scores. And I don't remember who, but there was a composer who was working in film scores too and said like, oh, don't get into film scores. Don't go to Hollywood. You'll just die. Like it'll be terrible. It'll be too commercial. You won't get to pursue your art. And you want to be a composer, stay out of Hollywood. And John Williams was like, oh, yeah, but I did go to Hollywood. And he's like, he's like, I understand that perspective, but I didn't have that perspective and experience. He's like, I found myself in Hollywood. And there was something kind of nice, like very optimistic about that. Like, I don't know, there was kind of lovely to be like, oh, that's where your artistic, nature flourished.
Here's an example of what I would have wanted to see more of, and I don't know whether you saw this
yeah.
part of the documentary. Williams conducted the Boston Pops for 4 years,
Yes.
and then he quit because the musicians were dicks.
I did not see that part, but I did know that.
Well, that's
he
basically
directed
the
it.
message you get. And then he comes back, and I don't know how long he did it after that, but I would have loved to have heard from, like, I know it's a celebratory documentary, but like from, I don't know, the first viola being like, yeah, he wanted to fucking do, ragtime. Fuck that. I don't know.
Yeah, it sounds like you wanted a more holistic approach.
And I
where
knew
you
what
get
this
different
I knew what this was
perspectives.
going to be.
Yeah.
It's on Disney. It's
Right.
so
It's not going to be the most
So I guess what I'm saying is it's
Contradictory
fine.
to
It's
him.
not my kind of documentary, but there's nothing wrong with it.
Mhm.
For what
Mhm.
it is, it's good for what it is.
I agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I liked this again. What I saw, I think I liked it a little bit more just because I like John Williams's scores. But I agree with you. You kind of know you're getting kind of a certain perspective going in.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if there's any filmmakers who don't like him, but if there was somebody who was like, John Williams, that motherfucker, I would have eaten that up.
That jerk.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
that would have been amazing.
yeah.
John Williams still owes me $20. That's right. Sandbagging son of a bitch.
See that, but I know we're joking about it, but it's funny. Those are the kinds of things I like in documentaries too. The things that are kind of like not supposed to be in a documentary, like
Hmm.
those kind of moments.
Yeah.
So I agree. I know what you're saying.
Oh,
Yeah.
well. So that's it. I mean, if you're into his scores and the movies that he has scored, it's definitely worth watching.
Yeah. I agree with that because there's so many little tidbits that I just found fascinating. So yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah.
So yeah. So sounds like maybe you'd say your mileage may vary on that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. I think you should see it. I think it's worth seeing, but
I want
Yes,
to see it.
yeah, if you're not a huge John Williams fan, I agree. You might not eat it up the way I did. But yeah, I'd love to hear what you think, Evan, after you see it, because I'm very curious.
I suspect I'll get at least several miles to the gallon.
Yeah.
Nice.
City or highway, we're not sure, but yeah.
Oh, that's stop and go traffic.
Mhm.
But now that we've talked about music by John Williams and whether or not we recommend it, let's do a recap on the other two films that we talked about. So, Dave, here, I think it's safe to say you would say don't see it.
I would say, boo! Just don't see here. Take it
Don't
over
be
there
there.
and dump it in a bin.
Nice. Or not nice, rather. But still nice. Okay. And High Tide, Evan, would you recommend it?
Yeah, I would recommend it. Hmm.
I completely agree. I think High Tide is a lovely gem. So, yeah, that's it. So we want to give a huge thank you to our editor, Otto Clammer. Otto, thanks so much for making us sound great week after week.
Thank you, Otto.
Thanks, Otto.
You can find Spoiler Piece Theater anywhere you get podcasts. You can also find us at our website, spoilerpiece.com. You can find us on social media. We're at Spoiler Piece Theater on Facebook and at Spoiler Piece on Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd, and Threads. Come follow us, say hello, let us know what you think of these movies or any movies. We like to know. And let us know what your thoughts on Ninja Turtles are. We want to know that too.
yeah.
Who's your favorite Ninja Turtle? Mine is probably
And why?
Michelangelo, although that's who it was when I was a kid because he liked pizza so much. I know they all did. But also he's a surfer dude, so it probably would be different now. It may be Donatello now.
I like a more thoughtful Ninja Turtle now that I've gotten a little bit older and wiser.
That's correct. That's correct. No more beach bum for me. You can email us, spoilerpiece@gmail.com, or you can give us a call.
86221-PEACE.
Leave us a voicemail message, text us, let us know your thoughts. We love hearing from you. If you like the show, please consider rating and reviewing us. You can go to ratethispodcast.com/spoilerpiece. Take you to your preferred platform of choice. You can rate us that way. It helps us get the word out. You can also rate us directly at Spotify or Apple Podcasts. And if you really, really like the show, if you're not already a patron, and thank you if you are a patron, but if you're not already a patron, consider joining. For $5 a month, you get access to weekly bonus episodes and over 300 of our bonus episodes in our back catalog. You also get to vote in monthly polls. For this week's bonus episode, we talked about Devil in a Blue Dress. Had a great time, great conversation, so go check that out. And yeah, thank you so much for listening. Thank you for being a patron. Thank you for listening. My name is Megan Kearns. I write for Edge Media Network. I also co-host the Slashers podcast. I'm a member of the Boston Online Film Critics Association, and I'm a member of Gallica. You can follow me on Twitter and Blue Sky at OpinionS World, or on Instagram and Letterboxd at The OpinionS.
My name is Dave Riedel. I write about movies. I'm a member of the Boston Online Film Critics Association, and I'm Dave Sees Movies on Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd, Threads, and Blue Sky.
And my name's Evan Crean. I am co-chair of the Boston Online Film Critics Association, co-author of your 80s Movie Guide to Better Living, and co-host of the It's the Pictures podcast. You can follow me on social media as Real Recon, and that's real as in film reel.
Thanks so much, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.